It was all going so well. It was going well. In case you didn't know, I started RC racing again for the first time in 17 years. I've entered the GT12 class. GT12 class didn't exist last time I raced. I used to race 1/10 scale touring cars. So anyway, went back racing. It was going great. It was going really well. I was really enjoying it. The first 3 weeks are free on the club I joined. For a quick recap, the first week went great, really well. Put the car on the track. It wasn't dialed in. Obviously, it was running the utterly stock setup, with the exception of it has this top deck conversion, which I bought and fitted as I built it, which stiffens up the whole chassis. Comes with a different front bumper mount. Comes with these side parts here to reduce chassis flex. But the setup was kit. The shock oil was kit. The camber strap at the front here, which dictates front camber and caster, that was stock. The shims at the back for track width at the back, that was stock. Ride height at the front was stock. Ride height at the back, which is dictated by inserts in the pod here, was all stock. So I didn't expect it to be dialed. But what it did show, the sun's coming out, it's probably going to ruin the lighting completely. What it did show was how competent the base platform was and how competent the standard kick setup was, because it wasn't dialed, but it handled well. And it went really well. I was put in the bottom heats because I hadn't done racing in 17 years, hadn't done GT12 before, didn't have a BRCA history really at all for almost 2 decades. And I won my first race. And I won my second race. And I won my third race. And then I was put in the B final. And I was last in the B final because I discovered that, unbeknownst to me, you could adjust motor timing in the stock class nowadays, which was illegal in the stock class when I raced. So I didn't touch the motor timing. And I had the slowest car in the straight by a long way. But anyway, I really enjoyed myself. I had no expectations. And it was great fun. So I went back on week 2, having turned up the timing slightly and changed the gearing. And the racing was more difficult because I'd been put up another class because of my results previously. I was against the people that I was against in the final the first week, not who I was against in the heats. And I started playing around with gearing more to try and get it, you see how it goes. Okay, I'll maybe go up a tooth here or whatever. It was good. It was absolutely fine. The car started to understeer like crazy on the second week because the carpet was new and it was bedding in, and as it bedded in, grip increased. As grip increased, you start to make an understeer because you've got so much grip. You can't seem to overwhelm that grip unless you're more aggressive on your setup. It's a strange concept to think about, but I probably didn't explain it right. But you might know what I'm talking about. So it actually started handling like a bit of a boat in week 2. It was planted, but it had no turn-in. And each race became more obvious that it didn't have any turn-in because with each race the carpet got grippier and grippier. But that was the least of the problems. The biggest problem at the club in week 2 was there was telemetry issues for a lot of people, not just myself. So I came 3rd in race 1, pretty sure. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I came 3rd in race 1. But according to the computer, 2 of us, including myself, didn't do any laps. And it wasn't that many people. There was maybe 3 or 4 people in the club, including myself, not getting timed. They reset the system, they tried to various things. And then that was never fully fixed, so most laps for races 2, 3 and the final had to be manually inputted. So the lap times weren't particularly accurate. But I think I managed to come 3rd twice again and then 2nd in the final. I did definitely come 2nd in the final. So not great in terms of the way that car was handling, and not great in terms of the way the telemetry was playing up. But it was fine, I was getting there. In the final, or just leading up to the final, I was talking about how I didn't have any turn-in. Really didn't have any turn-in. It was understeering, it handled like a boat. I couldn't get on the power because it was a case of, wait for it now, because it just couldn't get the nose in. So he was losing so much time, especially in the infield section. So as a sort of sticking plaster over a broken leg type of fix, I was advised by two of the gurus in the club to take out these two screws here, which connect these carbon fibre arms, therefore, basically removing their ability to stiffen the chassis. So taking those two screws out introduces chassis flex. It's not the right fix because the setup is wrong, but it was you've only got 2 minutes, let's just try this. And in the final, it absolutely worked. It was turning in much. It didn't handle well because the setup was off, and I've just literally unscrewed two structural points of the chassis. But it turned in more. And although I drove worse in the final than I did in the previous races, I came second in the final because the car was just so much faster because it could turn in. Anyway, I went home with knowledge and advice, ready to come back for week 3. So the two gurus told me to change the carbon fibre camber strap at the top here for strap number 1, or if you have it, strap number 3. I don't have strap number 3, you can't get it anywhere. For those who don't know, there's 4 straps available. There's the kit standard, there's strap 1, 2 and 3. Strap 1 and 3 have both got 1.5 degrees of front camber, but strap 3 has got more caster, it has 7 degrees rather than 5. So strap 3 is really the one you want, which is why it's sold out everywhere. But I only had strap 1, so I put strap 1 on it. Fine. I also fitted the green rated front springs, which were advised to me. Fine. I also changed the shock oil in the center shock here from 30k kit standard to 50k. In case you're wondering, that is very, very heavy, but it's not a standard shock setup. What else did I do? I didn't really change that much more. I think I maybe changed the gearing. One upgrade I did fit, ready for race 3, or week 3 rather, was the rear axle here. It comes standard with an alloy rear axle for the diff. I managed to get a carbon one, which is much lighter. It's a few grams lighter, but in terms of its overall percentage, it's a lot lighter. Plus, rotational mass makes a lot more difference than non-rotational mass in terms of performance. So if you fit a lighter rotational part, it's approximately 10 times more beneficial than it would be if that part was non-rotational. And considering this is a single axle rear wheel drive, that's going to make a big difference. And actually it did, and the car picked up better. So going into race 3, I had a slightly faster car because the motor needed to work less hard because my motor's a bit underpowered at the club. It's one of the slower cars in the straight. Less rotational mass, perfect. Motor really spinning up quicker, running cooler, not working as hard. I had the setup in mind, set up ready to go, and it worked perfectly. It worked so well. In the first race, it still didn't quite have the darty front end I like in my race cars, but you could feel it. We made a step forward. The chassis was better, much better. The setup was much better. It would rail around corners, where previously I had to adopt a sort of swooping driving style because it just couldn't turn in. This way I could carry corner speed. It was so much better. It wasn't quite there yet, but it was so much better. But it didn't count because although I won the first race in week 3, the telemetry issues were much worse than week 2. There were most of us in the club not recording laps. So according to the computer, 3 people out of the believe 5, it might have been 4, in the first heats, or in the heats that I was in rather, didn't register, didn't even start. According to the computer, we did no laps. So that was a bummer. Because it was the best race I've had yet, and it didn't count. And then it started all going wrong. I finally got there, so thanks for your patience. It all started going wrong. Going into race 2, I noticed that there were some chunks of foam missing off the side wall of this back tyre, my rear left. It wasn't too bad, but there were definitely chunks missing, so I thought, okay, I'll keep an eye on it. If it gets worse, I'll just need to buy new back tyres. Not a problem. Started the race. Now, there's a really nice guy at the club. He's a really friendly guy. I don't have anything against him. He's really friendly, chats away to you. But he put me into the wall straight away. And what happened there, as you can see it off the spoiler attached, what happened there is I slammed into the wall, and obviously the screws weren't tight enough on my spoiler or whatever. My spoiler fell off on one side. So it was hanging off like that. It was on this side as well. So it was hanging off, and it was flapping backwards and forwards. So as the car turned, this thing was flapping all over the place. And as the wind hit it, or the air hit it as it was moving forward, it was just moving around. And I couldn't believe how much difference that made. It was so influential on the car. If the spoiler went one way, the car would follow it. I mean, it was so influenced by the way the spoiler was flapping around, which meant you couldn't get any consistency whatsoever. Every corner was different. You'd take a corner and the spoiler would move and the car would try and go into the wall and stuff, and you're fighting it the entire time. It was a very difficult race 2. Also, another guy took me out twice, but nothing really happened. It was just he took me out and waited for me, but it just cost me time, nothing more. So I was limping around. Well, not limping, but I was trying to work around this issue. And it was going well. I was running second, despite the fact I was like, until about 30 seconds to go. With about 30 seconds to go in race 2, the car was all over the shop. I slammed into the wall. And from that point onwards, I could still turn, let me get this right, left okay. It wasn't great turning left, but it was consistent. It would take a consistent arc, but it wasn't the car it was before. Turning right, the car would just snap round instantly. So there was no control of it. You'd be like, oh, sorry, oh, here's a corner. Oh, corner. And it just, there was no control. And the amount it would snap and how violently it would snap was not the same every corner. And going down the straight, it wouldn't go straight. It wouldn't track straight. And I didn't feel like trim was off. Because if your trim is slightly off, your car does a very wide arc down the straight like that. Or like that. What this was doing, it felt more like it was tracking bumps. It was not compliant. It wasn't accurate. It was oh, here's a bump, jump that way, oh, jump that way. It was quite all over the place. Goodness knows. So I go back to the pit, worried. I couldn't put the spoiler back on because, see this post here, it's just over 10 mil. I measured it with the calipers, it's about 10.3 mil. There's 2 posts, one each side to hold the spoiler up, like that. One of them, the one that fell off, was missing. Couldn't find it all night, went looking for it, even when the track got put away and all the carpet got rolled up, couldn't find it. It's gone. So, Schumacher don't list these at all, anywhere. I've got no idea where to find more of them. So I've ordered rubber HPI 10mm tubes, which should suffice. But knowing HPI, they'll be here in like 3 months' time. So I had to run it without a spoiler for race 3. I knew that was going to make the race difficult. Of course it was going to make the race difficult because you got no downforce at the back. The back's going to be really skittish, but at least it should be consistent. The tyre that was, slightly chunked was now really chunked. Like half the tyre wall was destroyed. Probably from, well, almost certainly from the fact that it was all over the place and I would slam it into the walls while I was trying to fight it. So that tyre was destroyed. I figured, right, the tyre on those last 30 seconds when I slammed it into the wall and all of a sudden it was all over the place, it wouldn't turn one direction. Almost certainly I thought it was going to be the tyre wall chunked up and that was it. So I bought new tyres, they're only £5. So £5, got myself a new set of rear tyres, rear wheels and tyres, they come together. So I was hoping then my problems would be solved. Yes, I'd run it without a spoiler, yes, it'd be more difficult to drive, but at least it should be consistent, it should track straight, got the tyres, the damage is gone. Okay, straight away, no, it's still there. Something was wrong with the car, something majorly was wrong. Again, takes a left corner, relatively okay, wide, but at least consistent. Right, snap round. Wouldn't track straight in a straight line. Something was amiss. I was doing a few laps, I think I was running second or third, and then I thought, I am going to cause more damage here because I couldn't drive it right. I kept them hitting things, so I was like, no, I'm going to cause more damage, so I'm going to pull in and retire from the race. So I did that with about a minute and a half into the race. Stopped. Just waited for the race to end and then went off the stage. Can't see anything. Can't see anything on the chassis, can't see anything on the carbon fiber pieces, can't see anything on the suspension. But something is wrong, something is amiss. The only thing I can see, which I noticed afterwards, the rear pod is sloping that way. It's going like this. I can straighten it and it'll always drip to that one side. That was not doing that before. And if you compare it to everybody else's Schumacher Atom 2, or even everybody else's Schumacher Atom or whatever they're running, everybody else's pod sits level. This one is dripping to the side. I could try and push it all the way up to the other side and it goes past the center point and it keeps falling. It would fall much quicker, except there's quite heavy oil in it. But eventually it ends up like this. So there's something majorly wrong. The general consensus is the chassis is tweaked. The steel chassis is bent somewhere, but I can't see it by the eye. The steel chassis on the Atom 2 is known to bend quite easily. Thing is, some of the other cars were taking horrific hits all week, all race meeting, especially in the lower heats with some of the young kids. But I must have just been very, very, very unlucky. It was just the angle was right, or wrong, if you like, and that's it. But I'm hoping it is the chassis. I've ordered a new chassis, but I can't see it. I'm desperately hoping it is, because then you go down a rabbit hole of trying to find out what's wrong with pieces, very expensive carbon fiber pieces everywhere. And you can't see which one's which and which one's damaged, which one isn't. They all look perfectly fine. The droop screw at the back here, you've got a droop screw that goes through from the rear pod, touches the chassis. Okay, you won't see this on camera, almost certainly, but that droop screw touches the chassis there. It should touch exactly center. So you've got the two holes there, for example, as a guide. The droop screw should touch exactly in between those two, but it isn't. The droop screw is touching nearer this hole than this hole. So it's slightly that way. So as the pod is touching, not only is the pod is to the side, it's also relative to the chassis. The pod is also that way. It's more that way than it is that way. So something is majorly amiss. I really hope there's no damage to the rear pod, because the rear pod is made up of several very expensive parts. You know, carbon fiber, alloy metal mounts. It's got the differential in there. It's got the axle in there. It's got the hubs in there. It's got the shocks there. It's got the shock mounts. And obviously, if the pod is squint, it could be the chassis, or it could be this shock, or it could be that shock, or it could be that shock, or it could be that shock where it mounts, or it could be where these shocks mount, or it could be, you know, these pivot arms here. It could, I mean, literally the front of the car could be affecting the back of the car. I don't know. But something's amiss, and it's majorly amiss. And the car looks relatively flat when you set it down, although maybe it is slightly to one side, but I can't really tell, and it might just be because I know something's wrong. I'm seeing something wrong, if that makes sense. But everything else looks good. The springs left to right are the same. They're not, you know, misplaced. They're not sitting wrong. The shocks are working freely on both sides and at the front. The front of the pod, it's nice and loose. There's no binding. The pod can move around freely, quite nicely. But I can't drive it like this. In the final, I didn't even take part because I couldn't fix it, and I wouldn't have been competitive. And even if I was, I would end up either damaging this more or damaging someone else's car as I sort of struggle to drive it. You might be able to see, I don't know, probably not, but you got the screw that goes through here where the spring is. That's supposed to be absolutely perfectly in line with the little grub screw, the droop grub screw there, and they're not aligned. They're not aligned at all. Yes, that is one damaged race car. I wish the damage was so severe that I could see it, because the bottom line's the same. That part, whatever it is, needs to be replaced. So it doesn't matter if the part is ever so slightly tweaked or utterly snapped. I just wish I knew which one it was. Yeah, problem. So if any of you Atom 2 gurus are watching this video, any of you experienced race people, do you have any suggestions? The chassis is getting replaced. I have another one. It's on back order because they're not in stock right now. So I don't know if I'll be able to go this week, hopefully. As soon as it arrives, I'm replacing this chassis, even if I'm not sure it is the chassis. It's the easiest and probably cheapest option. I was advised to just get the carbon fiber chassis because it doesn't tweak the way the metal one does. But I don't really want to get the carbon one now because I want to keep the center of gravity as low as possible. If I get the carbon one, it'll be underweight. I'll just need to add extra weight and it won't be exactly as low as possible. But if it happens again, yeah, I'll maybe think about the carbon one. In the meantime, I don't see any twist. I don't see any tweaking. But I mean, the motor isn't even parallel. So you go very slightly, but you get the line here. The motor should be absolutely parallel to that line, and it just isn't. Please just be the chassis. If you have any advice for me, do let me know. I'll keep you guys updated. Because I don't know. I mean, it might be, if it's buried in some carbon fiber part somewhere. What is it? New kit time? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.